Creating in Geometry Dash is difficult, like super difficult. With tons of styles to choose from and master, it can be tough trying to figure out which one exactly fits you best and works with your creative mind. But today we're here to talk about one style that over the last few years has become so popular amongst creators. Because of this, I've gone on a long journey to learn everything about modern. The color choices, clean designs, as well as the confusing movement tricks and effects. I studied as much as I could so that in the end I can make some projects that I'm really proud of. And hey, if that isn't convincing enough for you, I'm going to be showing you the styles of two other extremely experienced creators and how they went about making some high-level modern for our newest level. Just so we're not biased. Before we get into things though, just a reminder to subscribe. I post tons of videos like these, I post shorts, I live stream, and I plan on releasing a level every single month this year, so you don't want to miss that. But let's get right into the video. So for a bit of context, this level is Valentine's themed. So as well as talking about the steps to make a well-made modern design, we'll also be touching on how to make themed designs, effects, and coloring. The first part begins with a style that I'd like to call design modern. It's a subgenre of the modern style, which encompasses other styles such as effect modern, artistic modern, as well as a few others that sort of go unnamed. These substyles can be identified mostly by what the focus of the part is. In this case, you can see a clear focus on the block design and coloration. If you're currently a design or glow creator who wants to get into modern, this is most likely the style that you can get started on. Now, onto the actual specifics. A key part of modern that Leah exemplifies fairly well here is the cleanliness of the structures. Each layer of your design should be clearly distinguishable through clean lines and borders. Compare this to a design or art style where gradients and complex shapes are often used to add texture. With modern, you're typically looking to use a softer color palette as well. In the editor, this will look like choosing color combinations that smoothly fit with each other in an environment. Pastel and neutral color tones are a great start to get that feel for modern coloration. However, if you don't want to take the easy route and you want true mastery over these color combinations, you should definitely take some time to study or learn some level of color theory from peers or online. If you'd like to learn some of the basics, here's a tutorial video in the corner so you can get started. Continuing on, her part is mostly composed of gradients and simple designs, her background being an extremely soft gradient from red to orange, with the block designs doing the same. An extremely important aspect in modern is creating a clear contrast between your background and foreground. To accomplish this, you'll often notice in modern that outlines will have varying brightness or hue to give your blocks clean boundaries. Leah does a very good job at keeping up with this here and throughout the entire level. Additionally, she has a very consistent usage of these connectors with circular endings to have some kind of shapes inside them. These are either used as a way to restrict the player movement or guide the player's eyes or to indicate where to click. Similarly, she used the same composition and color choices for her gears, again adding to a more consistent theme. For air decoration, she took a very simple approach using these X-shaped objects as plus signs, which is a very common addition for both modern and neo-design styles. You'll very quickly notice subtle similarities between these different styles, and you can use these to your advantage when switching between them. In summary, this first part is a great example of not thinking too hard and focusing on color composition more than any individual structure or design. However, we'll see later in this video that that is not the only approach that you can take to modern, not even close. Heading into my section, we get our first look into another aforementioned subgenre called effect modern. This style has a much smaller focus on more solid block designs or patterns and instead focuses on dynamics, effects, and diversity. You'll notice my block designs are extremely simple, only having a hue shifted bar on top and a section underneath with some hearts and wavy detailing. Outside of that though, it's all effects and pulsing. My spikes have no decoration, nor do my gears. The only thing in this section that has much detail put into it are these hanging platforms, which once again you can see use very minimal and clear detailing. The effects here follow suit, with movements, glow effects, and gradients that are all very sharp in how they're implemented into the part. For example, notice the black glow here. While it does have some fall off that makes it fuzzier, while playing it just looks like a black line that cuts through the bright details. But in hindsight, maybe it would have been better to just use a clean line instead of glow. I think those are just some of my design creator habits shining through. Continuing on though, you'll notice in a few spots throughout my part, I have some in-between sections that will break up the usual design. I want to make it clear that this is strictly a part of my style and is not necessary when making any kind of modern. However, from a level design perspective, it can be very instructional. In your decoration or even gameplay, you may find that you're making transitions or gaps where the level doesn't necessarily shift to a new idea, rather it's just taking a step away from it for a bit. This can help your projects feel more dynamic and allows you to more easily introduce the section after. You can see in these sections here how I did that exact thing. Moving into the ball, we return to the design modern style that we talked about earlier in the intro. For the block designs, I opted for multicolored curved interiors. I honestly struggled a lot with curves, so this took me forever, but in the end, I think it turned out pretty good. In the background, we also have some box shapes, which work for modern only because of how simple the texturing is. Small details like bezels, corner-to-corner slopes, crosshatches, and smaller shapes are easy ways to make a less significant structure more interesting while not adding so much to make it stand out. Now, the next section here is actually an odd merge of both design and effect modern. And while I do think that you can have major aspects of both and do really well, typically sticking to one or the other is going to be a lot easier and usually better. The main effect in the background of this part really isn't that difficult, by the way. All I did was place a bunch of circles and put one circle in the dead center. I then used the scale trigger to make the outside circles move away from the center while growing. Additionally, I used the shockwave trigger to create this wavy look to the circles when they get to a certain distance. I also did the same thing with the shock line later on to make these funky squiggly lines in the wave. Being a bit retrospective here though, so far in my parts there really hasn't been much theming going on. But you can see here, I actually did make an attempt to sell the Valentine's look by introducing scaling heart boxes and making the color scheme very vibrant with mostly pinks, purples, and some darker reds to give a chocolatey vibe. I did eventually abandon that as we get through the wave and cube, but hey, the idea was kind of there. Sorta. By the way, I'm very aware that I'm skipping over and only talking about certain things in each section. So if you have any questions about specific things that I did in the level, make sure to leave a comment down below and I'll make a YouTube short specifically for you. But moving on. In these next few parts, I'll be honest, the theming goes completely out the window. This next part is just totally space theme and there's no in between. There's no way around it. And then the next section, we introduce a duel that has a city background and some lovely block designs from Leah. We can definitely see that we've sort of left the theme behind. However, this is our first example of the third type of modern that I wanted to explain to you all, called artistic modern. Artistic modern is definitely the easiest style to actually comprehend, but it is by far the hardest style to perfect, as you actually need to have some knowledge in art forms itself. This is the type of modern that you see creators like Knots, Blee, and Xender do, who we'll actually be talking about fairly soon. As it says in the title, the focus of artistic modern is to either create an environment or to have a clear centered art piece that the rest of the part is based around. Here you can experiment with themed block designs, air decorations, backgrounds, and on occasion even effects. Speaking of which, after the duels we have a very short section made by me that continues this modern art style. It uses flat shapes and colors with just a bit of glow to create this very bubbly window glass environment. Fun fact, by the way, when I went to originally build this part, I did it all in one session, just clean through, and then when I went to save, it crashed. So instead of giving up, I actually locked in, muted myself in the call, and got the whole thing done remade one-to-one. I did the colors again, the art again, like literally everything. Like, could not be me again, honestly. Something extra to note here, by the way, is that this sort of modern style is also something that various creators get into that I think it's good to be aware of. It's this very cartoony, bubbly style where all of your edges are curved so that nothing looks particularly harsh, but you still have that clean modern look. Now, this next section is probably the most random of all the parts of the level, and let me explain why. This section in the level is not modern. In fact, it could have been modern with just a few tweaks. The current issue with it is that there are too many varying textures and patterns that clutter the screen for it to have that clean modernistic look we were talking about before. In any kind of modern, you're looking to have a cohesive environment that uses detailing to further depth and color and fill the view. But in trying to build a cohesive environment, we ended up abandoning any one of the themes present, instead opting for many different themes. Which I want to reiterate is not bad in any sort of way. But for design modern, it can be very difficult to achieve a clean, cohesive atmosphere if you don't stick to one or two ideas at a time. In this specifically, it would have looked like keeping our details simple and only doing the triangle shapes or only doing circular shapes. We could also simplify things down by reducing the amount of smaller miscellaneous details, such as the smaller triangle shapes and the differing spike variations. Overall, while this part may be good, it's still quite a ways away from being perfect, and stylistically, it is so much different than that design modern style that we maybe imagined it would be. To be clear though, I need to say that the criticisms I had for this section are specifically because it was attempting to do design modern. Trying artistic modern or effect modern all have their different guidelines, so I wouldn't take the criticism I said as a universal be-all for modern as a whole. Moving into the next section, we actually revisit the window concept from before, but this time with a little twist. Since the gameplay here is no longer a ship, we had to find ways to fill in the space and add structures to interact with. So instead of coming up with completely new concepts, we simply recycled. I need to put it out there that recycling ideas, especially ones that are in the same level that you're working on, is totally okay. We ended up using the block designs from the duel Leah made from earlier, and then used some artwork I made some months prior in an unfinished level. I think it worked pretty well in the end. Now, this next section is a very instructional moment. You see, I have a good friend named Sting, and he has zero experience with creating modern or really decoration in general. While creating this level, he offered an idea for a block design and presented this concept to us. So let's analyze. The idea itself is very good actually. We have multiple layers to work with. This is clearly a floating structure, so we can add multiple of them floating around, and the coloring, while it can use some work, is a great base. However, it's not very modern. The way to fix this was actually rather simple too, and I think that this again shows that for most levels that use modern, you shouldn't have to overthink it. Leah, the primary designer for this section, took the design and simplified it greatly. She took the layered yellow and orange slopes and sandwiched them together into one block. However, to keep the layered idea that Sting offered, she added her own gradient blocks to add on either side of the larger structures, which I think was a really nice touch. She then took the cloud concept and turned it into a cleaner 2D art style. This very much helped give the structure a clear and readable silhouette against the background. Lastly, as their own additions, she added these floating pillars, some gear designs, and a couple hanging platforms to continue the theming that I introduced towards the beginning of the level. Alright, so now that that part is done and over with, we're on to the next part, which is, oh my god! Now look, this part is by far the most complex out of any in the whole level, and that's to be expected, it's Xender game. However, a huge piece of advice that I need to give you all is that while it does look visually cool, if you want to make this kind of high-level style and want to finish in a reasonable amount of time, then you really need to build up to this. Xender built by far the least amount in this level, yet what he did build took by far the longest to complete. I say this because obviously this is Xender game. He's extremely experienced and he's definitely better than me at decorating. So if you want to build like this someday, pace yourself. You'll definitely get there, but even for the best of the best, this stuff takes time. Now, let's get into it. So for starters, Xender is very comfortable with his artistic modern side, so this part opts for that style. The designs here are very random, however what pulls it together is a very clean usage of colors while having good foresight. You see, the way Xender builds is by creating blueprints where things will eventually be, so he could properly plan out things beforehand. So while building his main block designs, he knew to keep the ones towards the top simple so he could fit things in like the galaxy cat or heart backgrounds. This is what a very advanced version of art direction looks like. He can create environments seemingly composed of random things that still fit not only because of where they're placed, but also because of where the colors are placed. Theming wise, this part does have a lot to be appreciated as well. You can see here that he made some love-hearted envelopes and letters. Alongside this, he has heart shapes scattered throughout the entire part, and again has a very soft and wholesome atmosphere created by the coloration. Now, moving into the robot, we were brought back to more of a design-based modern, with an ambiguous gear-shaped background to fill up the dead space. Once again, we're seeing this very clean usage of double outlines to distinguish the main foreground from the background. It really is unfortunate that we didn't think to make this level earlier, because I think there were some really cool ideas that could have been added to parts like these to make them feel more completed. In fact, I have a question for you guys. In this robot part, what things do you guys think could have been added to this to make it more completed? I'd definitely like to hear all of your thoughts in the comments, because if you've been watching my tutorials lately, I think it should be pretty easy. Anyway, to end out the level, we actually have a culmination of every part that you've seen thus far. The blocks here from the duel, the gears from the first part, and all sorts of things scattered throughout. I think again that this concept could have worked very well with some more planning and time, but in the end, I think that this is a very good finale to our Valentine's project. Overall, this project was made in just over 6 days. However, from the hard work of the whole squad, we ended up pulling through and hopefully gave you guys some instructional lessons along the way. Learning modern is not an easy task, especially if you've already locked yourself into another style for years prior. It's a different mindset, but I promise it can open your eyes. I thought that this style was something that only real artists could do, but in the end, I found that the only thing stopping me was me. So, give it a try. Dedicate the time to push yourself to new lengths, and I'll see you on the other side. Again, if you have any further questions about the level or modern for me, then make sure to leave them down in the comments. But that's all from me. Thank you for coming along on the journey. I appreciate every single one of you. Remember to subscribe. I'm ZeroSR. Stay real and peace out, boys.